My wealthy grandfather left everything to me. When he died, my family demanded I hand it over. I refused. They kicked me out that night. The next morning, I moved into his estate. When they showed up to evict me, they froze at who was standing beside me. 6 weeks ago, I was just Nate Hayes, 26 years old, guitar instructor at a small music shop downtown. My days were filled with teaching beginners how to strum their first chords and occasionally working with a kid who actually had real talent. My paycheck barely covered rent on my cramped apartment, groceries, and keeping my beat-up sedan running long enough to get me to work each day. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, I wasn't even on anyone's radar really, but I wasn't unhappy either. There's something satisfying about watching a 12-year-old nail a song they've been struggling with for weeks, the way their face lights up when it finally clicks. That was enough for me. I'd come home, practice on my own guitar until my neighbors started banging on the wall, and call it a good day. My parents never understood that. To them, success meant corner offices, expensive cars, and knowing the right people. My decision to teach music instead of climbing some corporate ladder was just another item on the long list of ways I'd disappointed them. The truth is, I always felt like a stranger in my own family. My father, Dennis Hayes, was obsessed with status. Every conversation with him felt like a performance review. My mother, Linda, cared more about appearances than asking how her son was actually doing. And my brother Kyle was the golden child, spoiled, reckless, and somehow always forgiven, no matter how badly he messed up. The only person who ever made me feel like I was enough was my grandfather, William. From the time I was a kid, his estate wasn't just a wealthy man's home to me, it was a sanctuary. I remember running through those marble halls, not caring about the paintings on the walls or how much they were worth. I only cared about the way Grandpa's laughter echoed behind me when I'd challenge him to a race down the hallway. On Sunday afternoons, he'd sit beside me at his grand piano. His fingers were surprisingly quick for a man in his 70s. He'd lean down and say, "Nate, money can buy you an instrument, but it can't buy you the music. That comes from here." And he'd tap my chest right over my heart. I remember asking him once why he never showed off his wealth like my parents did. He just chuckled and shook his head. "Son, the people who need to tell everyone how much they have usually don't have much else worth talking about. Real wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the relationships you build, the work you do with your hands, the legacy you leave behind. Everything else is just noise." That stuck with me, still does. Those lessons went way beyond music. Grandpa taught me that wealth was just a tool, not an identity. While my parents spent their whole lives trying to show off what they had, Grandpa lived with quiet dignity. He drove the same black sedan for years, wore suits older than me, never once tried to impress anyone. I spent more weekends at his place than at my own home growing up. We baked cookies in that massive kitchen, played chess by the fireplace, walked through the garden where he'd point out roses he'd planted himself decades ago. He actually listened when I talked about my dreams. Unlike my parents, he never rolled his eyes or changed the subject. I remember one conversation when I was about 16. I'd just told my father I wanted to study music instead of business. He'd basically laughed in my face and told me to stop being ridiculous. That evening, I drove straight to Grandpa's place, still fuming. He found me sitting on the back porch, staring at nothing. Didn't say a word at first, just sat down beside me with 2 glasses of lemonade and waited until I was ready to talk. When I finally told him what happened, he just nodded slowly. "Your father has his own definition of success, Nate. That's his burden to carry, not yours. The question you need to answer isn't what he wants for you. It's what kind of man you want to become. And that's a question only you can answer." I never forgot that. Sometimes I wondered if he knew I didn't really belong with them. If he could see the way my mother flinched whenever I chose to stay at his house instead of going on family vacations. He never said it out loud, but in the way he smiled at me, I always felt like there was a promise in there somewhere. "One day, Nate," he told me once, "you'll understand why I've kept you close." Back then, I just thought it meant he loved me. I didn't realize it was also a warning. It was a Tuesday evening when the call came. I was at my kitchen table grading some practice sheets, half listening to the creaks of my old apartment, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. "Mr. Hayes?" A man's voice, heavy and official. "This is Officer Daniels from the State Highway Patrol. I'm sorry to inform you that your grandfather, William Hayes, was in a collision tonight. His vehicle was struck by another driver who ran a red light. He didn't make it." The world blurred. My pen slipped from my hand, ink bleeding across the page. Didn't make it. My chest tightened. I refused to believe it. My grandfather wasn't just alive. He was eternal. He was supposed to come to my students' recital next month. He was supposed to call me tomorrow to ask if I'd eaten properly. He couldn't be gone, but he was. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and empty condolences. The estate that had once felt like a safe haven became a stage for hypocrisy. My parents took charge of everything, not out of love, but out of pride. They barked at the funeral director over flower arrangements, scolded the caterers for not bringing high enough quality food. My mother clutched her pearls and said loudly to someone, "Can you believe he drove himself? A man worth billions, and he still acted like a common person." My father stood stiff, jaw clenched, already calculating. His eyes weren't red from grief. They were sharp, restless, like he was doing math in his head. Assets, accounts, stock holdings. And then there was Kyle. My brother leaned against a marble column, scrolling through his phone, sighing like the whole event was an inconvenience. When I asked if he was okay, he just shrugged. "I'll be better once we know what we're getting." I wanted to lose it right there. How could they stand in the same room where Grandpa's life was being honored and talk about money like that? I stood near the casket, staring at his peaceful face. He looked almost asleep, hands folded neatly over his chest. I whispered so no one else could hear. "I'll make you proud, Grandpa. I promise." Arko. But when I looked around, I realized I was the only one who actually felt that way. Relatives who hadn't visited in years wept loudly for the cameras and then stopped the second the photographers packed up. My parents posed for sympathy, but their smiles flickered whenever someone mentioned Grandpa's fortune. When the service ended, I lingered, didn't want to leave him behind. That house, that garden, that piano, they were all haunted now, and I was suddenly very aware that I was completely alone. 2 weeks later, the call came from James Mitchell, my grandfather's lawyer. His voice was calm but firm. "Nate, your grandfather's will is ready to be read. He requested your presence and the presence of your immediate family. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., at my office." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I didn't know it yet, but that meeting would change everything. The next morning, I stood outside James Mitchell's office. The building was an old converted Victorian house, dark wood and stained glass windows casting long shadows. My palms were sweaty. It wasn't raining, but the sky hung heavy with gray. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and coffee. James greeted me with a solemn smile. Silver hair perfectly combed. "Nate," he said softly, shaking my hand. "Your grandfather spoke of you often. He was proud." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." Before I could say more, the door burst open. My parents swept in like they owned the place. My father adjusted his expensive watch with a snap of his wrist. My mother strutted forward in heels that clicked like gunshots against the hardwood floor. Behind them, Kyle slouched and wearing sunglasses indoors at 9 in the morning, shirt half tucked, smirk plastered on his face. "Let's get this over with," my father barked. "We all know how this goes. My father built the empire, and as his only son, I'll be managing it now." James's polite smile didn't falter, but I caught a flicker in his eyes. He gestured for us to follow him into a conference room, where a long oak table waited. I sat near him. My parents claimed the seats at the head like it was already theirs. Kyle sprawled carelessly across a chair, his sneakers on the edge of the table. James cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and opened a thick leather folder. William Hayes was of sound mind when he updated his will last year. He underwent cognitive evaluations, and I was present for every signing. There is no question of his capacity. My father waved a hand impatiently. Yes. Read it," James began. "I, William Hayes, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my final will and testament. To my beloved grandson, Nate Hayes, I leave the entirety of my estate, financial assets, real estate, investments, and holdings valued at approximately $7 billion. The words hung in the air like thunder. I froze, certain I'd misheard. $7 billion. To me. The room exploded. "What?" My father shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward. His face went crimson, veins bulging in his neck. "That's insane. He would never bypass me." My mother clutched the table like it would save her from drowning. $7 billion to a guy who teaches guitar lessons? He doesn't know the first thing about handling money. Kyle ripped off his sunglasses and slammed his palm against the wood. "Where's my cut? I need capital for my new startup. Grandpa promised me." James raised a hand calmly. Mr. Hayes anticipated this response. He made it clear, explicitly, that his decision was intentional. He stated that his son and daughter-in-law had been provided for during his lifetime, and that he wished his fortune to pass solely to Nate. My father's fists trembled. "Lies! You manipulated him, Nate, didn't you? Whispered in his ear while he was old and confused?" I shook my head, fighting back the emotions threatening to break through. "No, I didn't even know he was rewriting his will. I never asked him for anything." James reached for a remote and pressed a button. A large screen on the wall lit up, and suddenly there he was, my grandfather. He sat in his familiar leather chair, hands folded, his voice calm but firm. If you are watching this, it means I've passed. Dennis, Linda, Kyle. I love you as family, but I can no longer ignore what you've become. Greed has blinded you. You see me as a wallet, not as a father, not as a grandfather. Nate is different. He visits because he cares, not because he wants something. He lives with integrity. He will carry my legacy with dignity. My mother gasped. Kyle muttered something under his breath. My father shouted at the screen, "This is manipulation!" He wasn't thinking straight. But James's voice cut through the chaos. The will is legally binding. Contesting it will be expensive, and given the documentation, nearly impossible. The fury in my father's eyes as he turned to me was enough to chill my blood. "This isn't over, Nate. You think you can defy us? You'll regret it." I sat frozen, my grandfather's words still echoing in my ears. He will carry my legacy with dignity. At that moment, I realized the fortune wasn't just money. It was a weight, a test, a responsibility, and my family would do everything in their power to take it from me. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Come home, 6 o'clock. We'll settle this as a family." There was no question mark, no request. It was an order. Part of me almost didn't go. My chest tightened at the thought of walking back into that house. But another part of me hoped, stupidly, that maybe they just needed time to calm down. Maybe grief had twisted their words at the lawyer's office. I was wrong. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. The living room, usually reserved for my mother's social events, looked like a boardroom. My father stood by the fireplace. My mother perched on the edge of a designer chair, eyes cold and sharp. Kyle sprawled across the sofa, laptop open, typing furiously. "Sit," my father commanded. I obeyed. My fingers clenched in my lap. My father's voice was steady, but I could hear the rage simmering beneath. "You know what you need to do, Nate. Sign the estate over to me. I'll manage it properly. You'll receive a generous allowance, 10%. More money than you'll ever need." 10%? I echoed, my voice trembling. "That's over 700 million. My mother cut in smoothly. "Enough to buy a mansion. Enough to live like a king. You don't need responsibility, Nate. Leave that to your father." Kyle slammed his laptop shut. 700 million is plenty. I need the rest for my company. Grandpa wanted me to succeed. Don't be selfish. The words hit me like knives. Selfish. Grandpa chose me because I wasn't like this, I said quietly. Because I didn't see him as a bank account. My father's face hardened. He stepped closer, looming over me. "This isn't about choice. It's about family loyalty. Either you sign, or you walk out that door with nothing. Do you understand?" The silence stretched. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I thought of my grandfather, his laughter, his lessons. The way he told me money was just a tool. I thought of the way he smiled when I played guitar for him. Not because I was perfect, but because I was me. I lifted my chin. "No." The room erupted. My mother shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you, private schools, lessons, a roof over your head, and you dare defy us?" Kyle sneered. "Enjoy being rich and alone. You'll come crawling back once you realize money can't hug you at night." But it was my father's words that cut the deepest. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "If you walk out of this house tonight without signing, Nate, you are no longer my son. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't expect a single ounce of help. You'll be dead to us." My breath caught. Part of me wanted to beg him to take it back, but another part of me, the part my grandfather had nurtured, stood firm. "I guess I've been dead to you for years," I said quietly. "You never saw me. You only saw what you wanted." My father's face twisted with fury. He grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the front door. My mother followed, shouting orders like a general. "Pack a bag. 30 minutes. After that, the locks will be changed." I stumbled into my childhood bedroom. The walls were still lined with old trophies and faded posters. My hands shook as I stuffed clothes into a duffel. I grabbed my passport, my grandmother's old quilt, the photo of Grandpa and me in his garden. As I packed, I looked around the room that had been mine since I was a kid. The posters I'd hung as a teenager, the bookshelf filled with books I'd read a dozen times, the corner where I used to sit and practice guitar until my fingers ached. None of it mattered to them. None of it ever had. I wasn't their son. I was just someone they tolerated, someone they kept around because it was expected. And now that I wasn't useful to them, now that I wouldn't roll over and give them what they wanted, I was disposable. The realization should have hurt more than it did, but honestly, it just confirmed what I'd always suspected deep down. When I returned to the hallway, my father was waiting, arms crossed, eyes cold. He opened the front door and gestured outward. Out! The night air was icy as I stepped onto the porch. My bags felt heavier than they were. My mother's voice followed me out. You'll regret this, Nate. Money won't keep you warm. Family is forever. I turned, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. Then why did you just throw me away? The door slammed shut behind me, and just like that, I was homeless. But I wasn't defeated. In my pocket was a small brass key, engraved with my grandfather's initials, the key to his estate, the one place left that felt like home. I gripped it tightly. If they thought they could strip me of everything, they were wrong. This was just the beginning. The drive to my grandfather's estate felt longer than it was. My old sedan rattled along the dark road, headlights cutting through the mist. My duffel bags were piled on the passenger seat, but the only thing I clutched was that small key. My grandfather had pressed it into my hand last year with a wink. Someday you might need this, Nate. I never imagined he meant now. When the iron gates of the Hayes estate came into view, my chest tightened. They rose like sentinels against the night, tall and unyielding. For a moment, I hesitated. Could I really cross that threshold without him here? Would the house feel hollow without his laughter? But then I remembered the slam of my parents' front door, the finality in my father's voice. I had nowhere else to go. This was all I had left. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease. The gates creaked open, and I drove up the winding driveway, lined with old oaks whose branches seemed to bow in welcome. When the estate came into view, my breath caught. Its windows glowed softly, as though the house itself had been waiting for me. I parked in the circular drive and climbed the steps to the front door. My hand trembled as I turned the key. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and the scent hit me instantly. Lemon polish and cedarwood, the same smell I'd known since childhood. For a second, I just stood there in the doorway, breathing it in. Memories flooded back. Sunday dinners in the big dining room, summer afternoons playing in the garden, winter evenings by the fireplace with hot cocoa, while Grandpa told stories about his younger days. This place had always been my real home, even when I didn't want to admit it. I stepped inside. The grand foyer stretched before me, marble floors gleaming under the chandelier. My shoes echoed loudly, as if the house were aware of my arrival. I half expected my grandfather to appear at the top of the stairs, scolding me for being late to Sunday dinner. But the silence was deafening. "Mr. Nate!" I jumped, nearly dropping my bag. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man with silver-streaked hair, dressed in a neatly pressed uniform. Recognition flooded me. "Walter?" My voice cracked. He smiled faintly, lines deepening around his kind eyes. "Yes, sir. I've been with your grandfather for over 25 years. His gaze softened. "And now, I suppose, I'm with you." Emotions swelled in my throat. I thought everyone would be gone. I thought I'd be alone. Walter shook his head firmly. Mr. Hayes anticipated trouble. He told me, "If anything happens, you protect Nate. He is the true heir." He left detailed instructions. Of course he had. My grandfather was always 5 steps ahead. Walter led me into the study where a fire was already crackling. "I keep the house running," he explained. "Your grandfather insisted it remain ready no matter what. He said one day you might need sanctuary here." I sank into one of the leather chairs, the flames warming my chilled skin. For the first time all night, I felt the weight of safety, but it was fleeting. "What happens now, Walter?" I asked quietly. "My family. They won't let this go. They already threatened me." His expression darkened. "They came here once, after the funeral, tried to take things. Jewelry, documents. I stopped them. But Mr. Hayes knew they'd be back. That's why he prepared. You'll see. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Walter nodded. "Mr. Mitchell, the lawyer, will visit. There are files, recordings, even letters your grandfather left for you. He built a wall of protection around you, Nate. But you must stand firm." I leaned back, clutching the quilt I'd carried from my childhood bedroom. The house hummed with life around me, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the crackle of the fire, the faint whir of security cameras I hadn't noticed before. For the first time since the will reading, I felt something stronger than fear, resolve. If my family wanted war, they would find I wasn't alone. My grandfather's estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress, a legacy, and I was ready to defend it. That night, I slept in the guest room I'd always used as a kid. The sheets were freshly laundered. A book I'd left months ago still sat on the nightstand, bookmark tucked neatly inside. It was as if my grandfather had known I'd return. Not as a visitor, but as the one who belonged. I woke the next morning to the sound of voices downstairs. For a moment, I panicked. Had my family already found me? I grabbed my phone and crept to the landing, only to see Walter at the front door, speaking calmly to a familiar figure. "Mr. Nate," Walter called gently. "It's Mr. Mitchell." Relief washed over me. James Mitchell stepped inside, briefcase in hand, face serious but warm. He looked around the estate like he'd been here countless times. "Your grandfather trusted me with more than his will," he said, setting his case on the dining table. He trusted me with you. I followed him into the study. Sunlight spilled across the mahogany desk. He opened the briefcase and withdrew a thick envelope, sealed with my grandfather's initials. He wrote you letters, James explained. Guidance, instructions, and warnings. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were neatly typed pages, each one signed in my grandfather's steady hand. Nate, the first letter began. If you are reading this, then I am gone. I know your father and mother will come for you. Do not give in. I have prepared for this moment. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. You will not stand alone. I have gathered people who care for you, people who will protect you when blood turns against you. Trust them as you trusted me. As if on cue, Walter reappeared with a guest, a woman in her 50s, dressed in a simple cardigan, carrying a folder of documents. This is Helen Brooks, James said. Your grandfather's housekeeper for over 20 years. She's practically family. Helen's eyes welled up as she hugged me. Oh, Nate, you look just like your mother did when she was young, before greed hardened her. Your grandfather adored you. She laid the folder on the table. These are journals your grandmother kept, records of every visit, every demand your father made, every kindness you offered. They prove why your grandfather made his decision. I flipped through one. My grandmother's handwriting danced across the page. Dennis came again asking for money. When we said no, he stormed out. Nate arrived later with soup. He stayed until William's fever broke. Every entry was like a knife and a bomb at once. Painful proof of my parents' neglect, but undeniable validation of my bond with my grandparents. Before I could absorb it, another knock came at the door. Walter returned with a tall woman carrying a laptop bag. This is Carmen Reyes, James introduced. Your grandfather's business partner. She knows Hayes Industries inside and out. Carmen gave me a firm handshake. Your grandfather left me instructions to help you understand the company. He wanted you to know not just where the money came from, but how to protect the people who built it with him. She opened her laptop and displayed spreadsheets, charts, and notes. This isn't just about fortune. Hundreds of employees depend on this empire. He trusted you to uphold his values. Another wave of emotion surged through me. I wasn't just inheriting money, I was inheriting lives. By midday, more allies arrived. Frank Sullivan, the investment advisor, who had managed my grandfather's portfolio for decades. He brought binders full of transparent records showing just how carefully Grandpa had planned. The man had thought of everything. Contingency plans for contingency plans. Legal protections layered so deep, it would take an army of lawyers years to untangle them. Eddie Santos, the estate manager who had overseen maintenance of the grounds. He revealed updated security footage, cameras my grandfather had ordered installed after suspecting my father's intentions. Eddie walked me through the entire security system, showing me how every entrance was monitored, how motion sensors covered the perimeter, how the footage was backed up to multiple secure locations that my family would never be able to access or tamper with. Your grandfather didn't trust them, Eddie said plainly. He told me once that blood doesn't always mean family. Sometimes the people who share your last name are the ones you need to watch out for the most. Judge Thomas Warren, a family friend who greeted me with a solemn nod. Your grandfather asked me personally to act as a neutral witness if disputes arose. I will not let his wishes be twisted. He was a man of principle, and I intend to honor that. The room filled with voices, papers, evidence. For hours, they explained everything my grandfather had done. Every detail, every precaution. It was like a thread woven into a net designed to catch me if I fell. When the last binder was closed, I sat overwhelmed. He knew this would happen, I whispered. James placed a hand over mine. Yes, and he trusted you to be stronger than them. Walter straightened his shoulders. Your father came here after the funeral, tried to take jewelry and documents. He won't stop. He'll come back, and he'll bring the others. But this time, Nate, you'll be ready. The fire crackled in the hearth. I looked around the room at the faces. Loyal, determined, united. They weren't my blood, but in that moment, they felt more like family than anyone I'd ever known. I wiped my eyes and stood. If they want to come for me, let them. I won't run. I won't give up what Grandpa entrusted to me. Helen's hand squeezed mine. That's the spirit. He'd be proud. That night, I lay in the master bedroom, staring at the carved ceiling beams. For the first time, I understood the full weight of my inheritance. It wasn't just about surviving my family's rage. It was about protecting everything my grandfather built and proving I was worthy of his trust. And deep down, I knew tomorrow would bring the first true test. The morning air was heavy, almost electric, as though the world itself was bracing for a storm. Walter had stationed himself near the front door, shoulders squared like a soldier awaiting battle. Helen bustled in the kitchen, her movements calm but deliberate, as if baking muffins could soften the edges of war. By 9, The estate was alive with allies. James spread documents across the dining table, highlighting legal clauses and signatures. Carmen set up her laptop, projecting financial charts that proved how carefully Grandpa had managed the empire. Judge Warren sat near the fireplace, his presence alone radiating authority. I stood at the center of it all, heart pounding, palms slick. "They're coming," I whispered. As if summoned by the words, tires crunched over gravel. Multiple cars pulled into the driveway, sleek, expensive vehicles gleaming like predators. My stomach lurched. The pounding on the front door rattled the chandelier. "Open up, Nate!" My father's voice boomed. "You've had your fun, but this is over." Walter glanced at me. I nodded, forcing my breath steady. He unlocked the door and swung it wide. My family spilled inside like a flood. My father led the charge, face red, veins bulging. My mother swept in behind him, lips pursed in disdain. Kyle dragged his feet, but his eyes burned with greed. "This is still our house," my father barked. "You have no right to shut us out." I stood tall, though my knees trembled. "Grandpa gave this to me, legally, morally, every way that matters." Kyle sneered. "Don't play innocent. You manipulated him. He wasn't thinking straight. Everyone knows $1 billion empire belongs to the family, not some broke guitar teacher." James rose calmly, holding up a folder. "Actually, William Hayes anticipated these accusations. He left written and video statements clarifying that Nate was of sound character and that his decision was deliberate. Contesting this would be futile." My father snatched the folder, flipping pages furiously. "Fabricated," he spat. "You think a judge will take this over the word of his own son?" "Depends on which judge." A deep voice interrupted. All eyes turned as Judge Warren stepped forward. "And unfortunately for you, Dennis, I am one of them. Your father asked me personally to oversee any disputes. These documents, this evidence, it's airtight. You won't win." The color drained from my father's face. But rage quickly replaced fear. He jabbed a finger at me. "Ungrateful brat. You're tearing this family apart." I swallowed hard, my voice trembling, but firm. "No. You did that long ago when you chose money over love." It was the first time I'd ever spoken to my father that way. The first time I'd ever stood my ground without backing down, without apologizing, without trying to smooth things over to keep the peace. And you know what? It felt good. Not in a petty way. In a way that felt like I was finally honoring the man my grandfather had always believed I could be. My mother's composure cracked, her voice rising shrill. "After everything we gave you, private schools, lessons, vacations, you repay us like this? $7 billion belongs to the Hayeses, not to you alone." Helen emerged quietly from the side, holding a small box. "Actually, Mrs. Hayes, your son belongs here more than anyone. These are journals your mother-in-law kept. Every visit, every demand, every kindness. They prove exactly why William made his choice." My mother froze as Helen handed the box to James. He pulled out a page and read aloud. "Dennis demanded money again. When we refused, he shouted that we were stingy fools. Nate came later with soup and stayed until William's fever broke." The room went silent except for the crackling fire. Kyle suddenly lunged forward, slamming his hands on the table. "Enough. We don't care about your stupid journals, Nate. Just sign the transfer. I need capital for my new platform." "Grandpa would have wanted me to succeed." Carmen's voice cut sharp as glass. "He already gave you chances, Kyle. Multiple failed ventures, each one burning through money. Your grandfather refused for a reason, because you never earned it." Kyle's face turned crimson. He turned on me. "You think you're better than me? You'll choke under this pressure. You'll come begging for help." I stood, fire rising in my chest. "No, Kyle. For the first time, I'm not the one begging." My father exploded, sweeping documents off the table, scattering them across the floor. "This is garbage. None of this changes the truth. This fortune is mine. By right." "By right?" Judge Warren thundered. "Your father's will is law. You have no claim, Dennis. None." And then, as if fate wanted the final word, Walter stepped forward, a USB drive in his hand. "Mr. Hayes had me install new security cameras last year. They recorded something you should see." James plugged it into Carmen's laptop. Footage flickered to life on the screen. My father, mother, and Kyle rifling through drawers in the estate days after the funeral, stuffing jewelry and documents into bags. My mother gasped. That's taken out of context." A police chief who had slipped in quietly through the back stepped forward now, arms crossed. "Context won't matter in court. Theft is theft. You're one step away from handcuffs." For the first time, my father faltered. His bluster shrank, shoulders sagging. My mother's hands shook. Kyle backed away from the screen. I seized the moment, my voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm done being afraid of you. Grandpa trusted me. You can threaten, scream, steal, but you'll never take his legacy. Not from me. Silence. Then my father's voice, broken and venomous. If you walk this path, Nate, you are no longer part of this family. I met his eyes. Steady. You made that choice the moment you tried to destroy me. The estate seemed to exhale as they turned one by one and stormed out. Their footsteps echoed down the marble hall. Doors slamming. Engines roaring as their cars disappeared down the drive. I stood frozen, chest heaving. My knees threatened to give out. But then I felt a hand on my shoulder. James's calm, steady grip. You did it, he murmured. You stood your ground. For the first time, I believed him. The week after they stormed out, my father filed a lawsuit anyway, contested the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. James called me with the news, but he was laughing. They hired a third-rate attorney who clearly didn't do his homework. We have video depositions, cognitive evaluations, and sworn statements from 3 independent physicians. This case won't survive the first hearing. He was right. 6 weeks later, the judge threw it out, dismissed with prejudice. My father's attorney tried to argue that Grandpa had been manipulated, but when James played the video of Grandpa calmly and clearly explaining his reasoning, the judge actually shook his head in disbelief. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, looking directly at my father, your father was clearly of sound mind. This appears to be nothing more than a waste of the court's time. My father's face went purple. He tried to stand and object, but his own lawyer pulled him back down. But they weren't done. 2 weeks after that, I got a call from the police chief, who'd been at the estate during the confrontation. Turned out my family had tried to return the stolen items quietly, hoping to avoid charges. The chief wasn't having it. We recovered jewelry worth about $200,000 and several financial documents they'd taken, he told me. Your father's claiming it was a misunderstanding, that he thought the items belonged to him. I had a choice to make. Press charges and drag this into criminal court, or let it go. I pressed charges. Not because I wanted revenge, because my grandfather had taught me that actions have consequences. My father had spent his entire life skating by without ever facing any. That ended now. The DA offered them a deal. Plead guilty to misdemeanor theft, pay restitution, and complete community service. No jail time, but it would be on their record. My mother reportedly cried for 3 days straight. Kyle had to postpone his startup launch because no investor wanted to touch someone with a theft conviction. My father's country club membership was quietly revoked. I didn't feel bad about any of it. 3 months after the confrontation, I launched the William Hayes Foundation for Education and Community. We dedicated $2 billion to scholarships, schools, and local programs in underserved areas. The opening ceremony was held at a community center in the same neighborhood where I used to teach guitar lessons. I stood on stage, looking out at hundreds of faces. Kids I'd taught, parents who'd scraped together money for their children's lessons, teachers who'd been fighting with underfunded programs for years. I kept my speech short, told them about my grandfather, told them what he believed in, told them this foundation existed to give opportunities to people who deserved a shot. The first scholarship recipients were announced that same day. 47 students, full rides to State University. I shook each of their hands personally. One kid, maybe 17, grabbed my hand and didn't let go for a few seconds. His eyes were wet. My mom works 2 jobs, he said quietly. She was going to have to work a third to help me pay for school. Now, she doesn't have to. That moment was worth more than any number in any bank account. Over the next few months, things moved fast. Carmen helped me restructure Hayes Industries to improve employee benefits. We raised wages for the lowest paid workers by 18%, added better healthcare options, started a profit-sharing program that Grandpa had always wanted to implement, but never got around to. The board pushed back at first, told me it would hurt the bottom line. I told them the bottom line wasn't my priority. Taking care of the people who actually built this company was. They got on board real quick after that. I also started hosting Sunday dinners at the estate. Not fancy events, just good food and good company. James came. Carmen, Helen, Walter, Eddie, Frank, some of the company employees and their families too. We'd cook together, eat together, tell stories about Grandpa together. Helen burned the rolls 1 week and blamed me for distracting her. Walter told a story about the time Grandpa accidentally locked himself in his own storage cellar for 4 hours. Carmen's daughter taught me a card game that I'm pretty sure she made up the rules to as she went along. It felt like family, real family. 6 months after everything went down, I ran into my mother at a charity event. She was there with some of her old social circle friends, clearly trying to maintain appearances despite everything that had happened. She saw me across the room. For a second, I thought she might come over, apologize, try to make things right. Instead, she turned her back and walked the other direction. I didn't chase her, didn't call out, just watched her go. Then I went back to my conversation with the foundation's new director of operations, We were planning to expand the scholarship program to 3 more states by the end of the year. I had better things to do than chase people who never wanted me in the first place. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true. My wife and I were sitting in a restaurant when a man rushed over, pointed at me and snarled, "Who is this?" My wife froze. Sup, Reddit. Name's Damien, 34 male, 6 years of marriage, and I thought I had it all figured out. Turns out my wife had been living a double life and clowning me behind my back. Grab some popcorn and enjoy the shit show. I remember checking my watch, wondering if the waiter forgot about our appetizers. 8 p.m. on a Saturday night, our 6th wedding anniversary. Catherine had picked the restaurant, some overpriced place downtown. She said she wanted somewhere special. Let me tell you about my wife. Catherine was the kind of woman who thought the world owed her something. Beautiful, sure. High cheekbones, perfect hair, a smile that could get her whatever she wanted. But underneath all that, she was always doing the math on what everyone could do for her. I didn't see it when we were dating, but by year 3, I definitely did. By year 6, I just accepted it as the cost of keeping the peace. That was my first mistake. The second was thinking the peace was worth keeping. I'm a plumber. I own my own business, 12 employees, and contracts with 3 property management companies across the city. Not glamorous work, but I built something real from nothing. Started with a van and a wrench. Now I've got an office, a warehouse, and a reputation that keeps the phone ringing. Catherine never missed a chance to remind people at parties that her husband fixed toilets for a living. She'd laugh like it was a joke, then change the subject to something that made her look better. It was never a joke. The restaurant was packed that night. Couples everywhere. First dates and anniversaries and the occasional awkward business dinner. She was being extra charming. Kept touching my hand across the table, laughing at things that weren't funny, complimenting my shirt like she hadn't seen it 100 times before. She was nervous. That's when I noticed movement from across the room. A guy heading straight toward us. Tall, athletic build, dark hair. He wasn't scanning for an empty table. He was locked onto us, coming right at our table with an expression that said someone was about to have a very bad night. He stopped right next to us and pointed his finger directly at me. His voice was loud enough that the surrounding tables went quiet. "Who is this, Catherine?" I looked at my wife, expecting her to laugh it off. But she didn't laugh. She didn't say anything. Her face went white. Her hand started trembling. The silence stretched. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. Felt like forever. I turned back to the guy, made direct eye contact, and something passed between us. His eyes flicked to Catherine's frozen face, registered her obvious guilt, then came back to me. I watched him do the math. He blinked, took a half step back. His posture shifted. "Oh man, my bad," he said, his voice completely different now. Casual, embarrassed. "I thought she was someone else. You two look just like... Never mind. Wrong couple. Sorry about that. Enjoy your dinner." Smooth. He gave me the slightest nod, barely noticeable, something Catherine couldn't have seen from her angle, and turned away. Walked back across the restaurant like nothing had happened. Catherine let out this huge breath. Her color slowly returned. "That was so weird," she said, her voice a little too high. "Must have mistaken me for someone. People say I have one of those faces. Crazy, right?" "Crazy," I agreed. But I was already thinking. That guy knew her name. He'd said Catherine, clear as day. He knew exactly who she was. And the way she'd frozen told me everything her mouth was too smart to admit. We finished dinner. Catherine relaxed as the evening went on, probably convincing herself that I'd bought the mistaken identity story. She ordered dessert, talked about wanting to redo the master bathroom, and mentioned something about her sister Daphne coming to visit next weekend. Normal stuff. I nodded along, said the right things at the right times, while my brain quietly ran through every suspicious moment from the past year. Late nights at work that didn't match her actual workload. Weekend brunches with friends I'd never met. Phone calls she'd taken another room. Texts that made her smile in ways she never smiled at me anymore. All those little moments I'd written off as normal marriage stuff were suddenly forming a pattern so obvious, I felt like an idiot for missing it. When she excused herself to use the restroom, I moved fast. I grabbed a napkin from our table, wrote my phone number on it with the pen I always carry, and flagged down our waiter. "See that guy at the bar? Dark hair, gray shirt?" The waiter glanced over. "Yeah? Give him this. Tell him we should talk." The waiter looked at the napkin, then at me, then at the empty chair where Catherine had been sitting. "Rough night?" he asked. "Dude, you have no idea." He pocketed the napkin. I got you. And for what it's worth, I've seen that lady in here before. She wasn't with you. Middle of the afternoon, maybe 2 months ago. Same guy from the bar. The bill was already pushing 300, so I just rounded up to an even number and added 20 more for his trouble. Worth it for that piece of information. Catherine came back from the bathroom with fresh lipstick and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We drove home in comfortable silence. She fell asleep quickly that night, probably exhausted from the adrenaline crash. I laid awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail, waiting for my phone to ring. His name was Enzo. He called me at noon the next day. The conversation was short, careful, both of us dancing around the obvious. Neither of us wanted to say too much over the phone. We agreed to meet at a diner on the east side of town. I told Catherine I had an emergency call from one of my property management clients, some burst pipe in a commercial building that needed immediate attention. She barely looked up from her phone, didn't even ask which building. 6 years of marriage, and she couldn't be bothered to fake interest in my work for 5 seconds. Enzo was already in a booth when I arrived, back to the wall, facing the door. I slid into the seat across from him. Neither of us spoke for a solid minute, just two guys sitting in a diner booth, trying to figure out what you're supposed to say to the man who's been sleeping with your wife. The waitress came by, we both ordered coffee, and she left us alone. This is weird, Enzo said finally. Yeah, I keep thinking I should apologize, but I'm not sure what I'd be apologizing for. I didn't know. I know you didn't know. He stirred his coffee. 6 months, he said. She told me she was separated. Said her husband was basically just a roommate, that the divorce papers were already being drawn up, that she was just waiting for everything to finalize before moving out. I nodded, processing. We've been married 6 years. No separation. No divorce papers. Not even a serious argument about it. We just had our anniversary dinner. She picked the restaurant. Enzo closed his eyes, pinched the bridge of his nose. I feel like a complete idiot. Join the club. She had this whole story about an emotionally unavailable husband who made her feel invisible. Said you worked all the time, never took her anywhere, made her feel like furniture? Something twisted in my chest, because she'd thought about me enough to craft a whole story. I took her to a restaurant last night that cost me $300, I said. I take her on vacation every year. I bought her a car last spring because she said her old one made her look unsuccessful. But sure, emotionally unavailable. Yeah, well, she's good at telling people what they want to hear. That was the first true thing anyone had said about Catherine in years. So what do we do about it? Enzo asked. That was the question I'd been working on all night. The old version of me would have confronted Catherine immediately, demanded answers, probably ended up looking like the crazy jealous husband while she cried and twisted and gaslit her way out of it. I'd seen her operate that way before. When her friend accused her of spreading a rumor at a party, Catherine turned the whole thing around so thoroughly that the friend ended up apologizing. The woman could manipulate anyone. I want a divorce, I said. My lawyer said adultery could matter here. Yes, I already contacted a lawyer that morning. That if I can document it, I come out ahead in the settlement. If it's just my word against hers, she's got a 50-50 shot and a lifetime of practice making herself look like the victim. And you want my help. You've been seeing her for 6 months. You know her schedule, her lies, her patterns better than I do at this point. Help me document everything, and I'll make sure you come out of this clean. Just two guys who got played by the same woman, getting even together. Enzo thought about it, drummed his fingers on the table, looked out the window. I've got a decent job, he said finally. Good reputation. Last thing I need is being known as the guy who broke up some family man's marriage. You didn't break up anything. She did. I'm offering you a chance to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. 10 more seconds of silence. Then he stuck out his hand. All right, I'm in. What do you need? Over the next 3 hours, fueled by bad diner coffee and worse diner food, we mapped out everything. Enzo gave me dates, times, locations, hotels they'd used, restaurants they'd visited. The apartment she'd told him was her temporary place, while the fake divorce finalized. That apartment was actually her sister Daphne's, which explained a whole lot. Daphne was Catherine's younger sister by 3 years. She'd been covering for Catherine the entire time, providing alibis and cover stories and a convenient address for extramarital activities. Every time Catherine said she was at Daphne's place, she was actually with Enzo. Every time she said Daphne needed help with something, she was actually somewhere a wife shouldn't be. Sisters working as a team to fool everyone around them. Does Daphne have a boyfriend? I asked. Yeah, some finance guy. Tyler something. She's been dating him about a year. So Tyler has no idea his girlfriend's been running cover for a cheater. No clue. Seems like a decent guy, too. Met him once when he came by to pick Daphne up. I filed that information away for later. Before we left, Enzo asked me something that caught me off guard. How are you so calm about this? If I found out my wife was cheating, I'd be punching walls. I thought about it. I think I stopped being surprised by Catherine a long time ago, I said finally. This just confirmed what I already suspected, but didn't want to prove. He nodded like he understood. For what it's worth, she talked about you sometimes. Made you sound like a total loser. But sitting here across from you, I see a guy who's about to handle his business. Thanks, Enzo. Now let's figure out how to take her down. He grinned. I think I'm gonna like working with you. The next 3 weeks were the most productive stretch of my life. I had 2 people helping me besides Enzo. My younger brother Sam, who worked at a law office downtown, and my buddy Ricky, who'd been my best friend since high school and was good with money. Between the 4 of us, we started building a case. Sam walked me through what I'd need for an at-fault divorce in our state. What kind of evidence mattered, how to protect my assets before filing, that sort of thing. He also connected me with a divorce attorney his office had worked with before, a woman named Margaret who had a reputation for not messing around. Ricky helped me dig through our finances. He spent a weekend going through bank statements and credit card records, looking for anything that didn't add up. What he found made me sick. Catherine had been skimming money for over a year. Small amounts, nothing that would have jumped out at me, but consistent. She'd also opened a credit card I didn't know about and run up 12 grand in charges. Hotels, restaurants, a spa weekend she'd told me was a work conference. All of it documented with dates that matched nights she'd supposedly been somewhere else. She wasn't even trying to hide it, Ricky said, sliding a stack of highlighted statements across my kitchen table. She just figured you'd never look. She figured right. Until now. Meanwhile, Enzo continued seeing Catherine like nothing had changed, but now every interaction was data collection. He saved every text, screenshotted every lie, documented every hotel room and dinner reservation. The voice recording was Enzo's idea. He mentioned that Catherine loved to complain about me during their dates, really get specific about how miserable her fake marriage was. So he started recording those conversations on his phone. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to hear every word she said about how predictable I was, how boring our life together had become, how she'd wasted her best years on someone who would never understand what she deserved. That recording wasn't going to help her. Ricky came through with another discovery midway through week 2. He'd traced a series of cash withdrawals that didn't match any regular expenses. Following the paper trail, he found that Catherine had been funneling money into a separate savings account under just her name for almost 2 years. Not huge amounts, maybe 5 grand total, but the pattern showed this wasn't impulsive. She wasn't just having an affair. She was building an exit strategy. She was planning to leave you anyway, Ricky explained. The affair probably sped things up, but look at these deposits. They started before she even met Enzo. She's been preparing her way out while you thought you were building a life together. That changed the whole picture. This was planned. A long-term scam that I'd been too trusting to recognize. The hardest part was acting normal at home. Every morning, I woke up next to a woman who'd been sleeping with someone else for half a year. I'd lie there for a few minutes before she woke up, just looking at her face, trying to figure out where the woman I married had gone. Maybe she'd never existed. Then she'd wake up and I'd smile, and we'd have coffee together, and I'd kiss her goodbye before work. The performance wore me out. Some nights I'd sit in my truck in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside, just to get my head right, just to put the mask back on. Then I'd remember the recordings and the texts, the way she laughed with Enzo about how easy I was to fool. And the grief would turn into something harder, something that could wait. Her sister Daphne came over one weekend, just like Catherine had mentioned. Her boyfriend Tyler came along, a decent guy who clearly had no idea his girlfriend was a professional accomplice. I watched the sisters exchange coded looks all evening. Little signals, inside jokes. They thought they were being subtle. They weren't. Tyler and I ended up on the back porch while the sisters did whatever scheming sisters do. He worked in commercial real estate, had plans to propose to Daphne within the year. Poor guy had no clue. Had Daphne ever mentioned wanting to elope? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Catherine keeps saying her sister wants to lock things down quick. Tyler frowned. She hasn't said anything like that. We've only been together a year and change. I figured we'd take our time, do it right. Smart man, never rush into major commitments. He smiled. That's exactly what my dad says. By the end of week 3, I had enough. A folder with photographs, recordings, bank statements, and text screenshots. Not a perfect case, but a solid one. Sam thought it was enough to file confidently. Ricky had found enough financial inconsistencies to raise serious questions. Enzo had documented enough lies to make her story fall apart. Margaret said we had a strong negotiating position, which was lawyer speak for, she's not going to like what's coming. The only question left was when and where to make my move. Catherine's parents hosted a family dinner every month at their place. Her dad, Jacob, was a retired contractor who'd always treated me like a son, more supportive than my own father had ever been. Her mom, Diane, was kind but oblivious, the type who assumed the best about everyone because it was easier than dealing with reality. The extended family rotated through these dinners, a parade of aunts and uncles and cousins who all believed Catherine was the golden child of the family. The next monthly dinner was Sunday. The timing was perfect. I called Enzo that night. "How do you feel about crashing a family dinner?" There was a long pause. Then he laughed. "I thought you'd never ask." The week leading up to the family dinner was all about staying patient. Catherine had no idea what was coming. She spent the week complaining about her manager at work, doom-scrolling social media, and sneaking texts to Enzo whenever she thought I wasn't paying attention. I caught her smiling at her phone at least a dozen times. The strangest part was how normal everything felt on the surface. We ate dinner together, watched TV together, had conversations about groceries and utility bills, and whether we should get the gutters cleaned before fall. 6 years of marriage had built up these routines, these patterns, and they just kept running on autopilot even though the whole thing was about to blow up. Wednesday night, she told me she loved me like it was just part of the routine. I set it back because keeping the mask on was easier than starting a war early. I finalized the financial transfers on Thursday. Ricky had helped me set up a new account at a different bank, one where Catherine's name appeared nowhere. Everything I could legally move went there. Our joint account still had enough to cover bills and not raise suspicion, but the savings I'd built over 10 years of running my business, the emergency fund, the investment accounts, all of it was now protected. When Catherine eventually tried to access those funds, she'd find nothing but dust and a very unpleasant surprise. Margaret called Friday afternoon to confirm the divorce papers were ready. She walked me through the filing one more time, made sure I understood the timeline, and reminded me that the evidence we had was strong, but not guaranteed to produce any particular outcome. I picked up the papers that afternoon, held them in my hands for a long time, sitting in my truck in the parking lot outside Margaret's office. 6 years of marriage, reduced to a stack of legalese and exhibit numbers. It should have felt like failure. Instead, it just felt like the end of something that had needed to end for a long time. Sam came over that evening while Catherine was at her book club, which was actually Enzo's apartment. We sat on my back porch and reviewed the plan one final time. The timing, the sequence, the backup plans if something went sideways. "You're sure about including the sister?" he asked. "That's going to cause a lot of collateral damage. Daphne's been lying to her own boyfriend for 6 months straight, all to help Catherine run her double life. Tyler deserves to know he's been building a future with someone who can't tell the truth." "Fair point. Just making sure you've thought it through." "Bro, I've thought about nothing else for 3 weeks. I know exactly what I'm doing." Sam nodded. He'd been skeptical at first, back when I'd told him about the guy at the restaurant and what I'd found on Catherine's phone. Not skeptical of the facts, just worried about me. Whether I was handling it okay, whether I was going to do something stupid. He'd relaxed once he saw how methodical I was being about the whole thing. Saturday night, Enzo and I had our final coordination meeting in a parking lot behind a grocery store. We'd gotten paranoid about texting or calling, convinced that somehow Catherine would discover our alliance. Probably unnecessary, but neither of us wanted to take chances this close to the end. "You show up 30 minutes after I start," I explained, leaning against his car. "I'll text you the address when I'm ready. Her dad will answer the door. By that point, I'll have already mentioned you by name. He'll let you in just to get answers. And then what? Then you tell them your side, how you met her, what she told you about me, the whole thing." Enzo was quiet for a minute. "This is gonna blow up her whole life." "Yeah. You okay with that?" I thought about it. She's been living a lie for 6 months. Probably longer based on what Ricky found. She's been taking my money, using my trust, building an exit plan, while I thought we were building a marriage. So yeah, I'm okay with it. He nodded slowly. "All right then. 30 minutes after your text." Sunday morning, I woke up next to Catherine for the last time, as her husband. She was sleeping peacefully, breathing steady, probably dreaming about whatever future she'd imagined with Enzo. A future that was never going to happen. I made coffee, sat on the back porch, and watched the sun come up. It was going to be a beautiful day. The family dinner was at Jacob and Diane's house, a big ranch-style home they'd owned for 30 years. Cars already lined the driveway when we arrived, Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole crew. Catherine was in a great mood, chattering about some drama at her office, completely unaware that her own drama was about to play out in front of everyone she'd spent her life trying to impress. Inside, the house smelled like Diane's homemade bread. Hugs all around, the usual small talk about weather and traffic, and did you see the game last week? Jacob pulled me aside to ask about a plumbing issue in their rental property, and I promised to send one of my guys over Monday. Normal family stuff. Daphne arrived with Tyler about 20 minutes later. She was dressed in something expensive that Tyler had probably paid for. He shook my hand, made some joke about fantasy football, and wandered off to talk to one of Catherine's uncles about investment strategies. Genuinely nice guy. Dinner was the usual chaos. Too many conversations happening at once, people passing dishes and interrupting each other. I ate, contributed to discussions about nothing important, watching the clock on the wall tick toward 0 hour. Catherine was in perfect form that night, charming, attentive, laughing at all the right moments. She touched my arm while she spoke, complimented her mom's cooking, asked her father about his golf game, the perfect daughter, the perfect wife. After the main course, everyone migrated to the living room for coffee and Diane's legendary apple crisp. Conversation settled into the comfortable murmur of a family that spent decades in each other's company. Jacob was telling a story about a job site mishap from the 80s. Daphne was showing Tyler something on her phone, probably house listings they'd been looking at. Catherine was laughing at something her aunt said. This was my moment. I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. The room gradually quieted. All eyes turned to me. Catherine looked over with curiosity, probably expecting some kind of announcement about house renovations, or maybe a surprise trip. Her parents smiled. I need to share something with everyone, I said. Something I've discovered recently about my marriage. Catherine's smile flickered. I pulled out the folder. Started with the photographs, all from Enzo's phone and their text history. Laid them on the coffee table one by one, letting each image tell its own story. A selfie of them at a downtown restaurant, sitting close, sharing dessert. A photo outside a hotel lobby, his arm around her waist. A picture she'd texted him from Daphne's apartment building at 10 o'clock on a night she'd told me she was working late on a project deadline. These were taken over the past 6 months, I said. My voice was steady. The man in these photos is named Enzo. He's been sleeping with my wife since April. For a second, nobody moved. Then everyone moved at once. Jacob started to stand, then sat back down. Diane made a small, wounded noise. One of the aunts said, "Oh my God," loud enough that it carried across the room. Catherine shot to her feet, knocking her coffee cup off the side table, and it shattered on the floor. But nobody moved to clean it up. "This is insane," Catherine said, her voice too loud. "You can't just accuse me of—" "I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm presenting documentation. I played the first recording." The room went completely silent as Catherine's voice filled it, talking about her boring husband and how easy he was to fool, and how she couldn't wait to start her real life with someone who actually appreciated her. Her own words, her own voice, broadcast to everyone she'd ever tried to deceive. When the recording ended, several people started talking at once. Jacob was asking Catherine something I couldn't make out. Diane was crying. The uncle who'd been talking about investments earlier looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. Catherine was trying to explain, her words tumbling over each other. Something about context and venting and how I was twisting things. "That recording is taken out of context," she tried. "I was venting to a friend about—" That's when the doorbell rang. Jacob stood slowly, probably grateful for any excuse to leave the room. He walked to the front door, and when he came back 30 seconds later, Enzo was following behind him. Catherine gasped. She actually stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the rug. "Everyone," I said. "This is Enzo. My wife told him she was separated and filing for divorce. He had no idea she was still married until 3 weeks ago." Enzo looked uncomfortable, which made sense. A room full of strangers staring at him like he was a piece of evidence. "Hey," he said. "Not exactly eloquent, but what do you say in that situation?" "Yeah, so, your daughter told me she was basically single. Divorce was supposedly happening any day. Turns out that wasn't even close to true." Catherine turned on him, fear becoming fury. "You helped him do this? You helped him humiliate me? You did this to yourself. I just kept receipts." Jacob's voice cut through everything, low and flat and dangerous. "Catherine, is any of this true?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For once in her life, the words wouldn't come. "There's more," I said. "Daphne." Daphne's face went white. Tyler, who'd been watching the chaos unfold like a spectator at a car wreck, suddenly looked directly at his girlfriend. I pulled out the second folder. Screenshots of text conversations between the sisters. Daphne coaching Catherine on which alibis to use. Daphne confirming she'd covered when Tyler asked where she'd been. Daphne laughing about how easy it was to fool everyone. She's been covering for Catherine this entire time, I explained. Every fake alibi, every coordinated lie, every time Catherine claimed to be with her sister. Daphne backed it all up. She's been lying to you, Tyler, for 6 solid months. Tyler took the printouts, read them slowly. His face went through the same journey everyone else's had already traveled. Confusion, then understanding, then cold, quiet anger. You told me you were visiting your mother, he said to Daphne, his voice flat. You told me you had food poisoning. You told me your car broke down 3 different times. Tyler, please, let me explain. No. He handed the screenshots back to me. Don't contact me. He walked out without another word. The front door closed behind. Daphne collapsed into tears. Catherine was still frozen in the middle of the room. Their mother was sobbing into a napkin. And Jacob, the man who'd treated me like his own son for 6 years, walked over and put his hand firmly on my shoulder. What do you need from me? He asked quietly. Nothing, sir. I just needed you to know the truth before I filed. You have it. Whatever you're doing next, I support it completely. I reached into the folder one final time and pulled out the divorce papers. Walked over to Catherine, who flinched backward like I was going to hit her, and placed the documents firmly in her shaking hands. You've been served. Happy anniversary. The weeks following the family dinner were chaotic. Catherine didn't take the exposure well. Not that I expected her to. She showed up at one of my job sites the week after the dinner, stood in the parking lot screaming about how I'd humiliated her in front of everyone she loved. My guys just stood there awkwardly until she ran out of steam and drove off. Nobody knew what to say afterward. I just went back to work. She tried hitting me where she thought it had hurt, calling a couple clients and posting vague betrayal stuff online. But I'd already warned my main accounts, and the internet sympathy didn't last once her own cousin basically implied she was lying. The posts quietly disappeared, and so did her momentum. Daphne was having her own problems. Tyler had cut her off completely after walking out of that dinner. Blocked her number, blocked her on everything, told their mutual friends exactly why. Within 2 weeks, he was apparently seeing someone else, which might have been petty or might have just been how he coped. Either way, Daphne blamed Catherine for the whole thing, and Catherine blamed me, and their family dinners turned into cold silences and excuses not to show up. Jacob checked in with me a few times during those weeks, called to see how I was doing, asked if I needed anything. He apologized once, formally, for his daughter's behavior, said he'd raised her better than that and didn't understand where things had gone wrong. I told him it wasn't his fault. Some people just turn out the way they turn out, regardless of how they were raised. He appreciated that. The divorce itself was a grind. Margaret was good at her job, but good lawyers can't make the legal system move faster than it wants to. There were filings and responses and counterfilings. Catherine's attorney tried to negotiate, then tried to stall, then seemed to accept the inevitable. The first settlement offer came about 3 weeks in. Catherine rejected it. The second offer came a month later. She rejected that too. Margaret warned me she might try to drag things out, either to punish me or hoping I'd get tired and agree to worse terms just to be done with it. But Catherine ran out of rope before I ran out of patience. Maybe her lawyer finally got through to her. Maybe she ran out of money. Either way, she signed the third offer 2 days before we were supposed to appear before a judge. The terms weren't perfect, but they were fair given the circumstances. I kept the house and the business assets. She got a settlement that was smaller than it would have been if she'd just cooperated from the start. The house was finally mine alone that weekend. It felt strange at first, being there without anyone else. The furniture was the same. The pictures on the walls, minus a few she'd taken, were the same. But the whole place felt lighter somehow, like something heavy had finally been carried out of it. Ricky and Sam helped me clean out the stuff she'd left behind. Boxes of clothes she hadn't bothered to collect. Decorations she'd picked out that I'd never really liked. Wedding photos I couldn't look at anymore. We loaded it all into a storage unit, and I told her where the key was. Not my problem after that. The first few weeks on my own were an adjustment. You build habits over 6 years with someone. You get used to another person's presence, their routines, the sound of them moving around the house. Suddenly all of that was gone, but the silence was clean. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of living with someone you couldn't trust. Just ordinary alone, the kind that's actually peaceful once you stop fighting it. 3 months after the divorce finalized, life had settled into something almost normal. I was at a sports grill with the crew, watching a playoff game on the big screens. Enzo had become a regular by then. What started as a necessary alliance had turned into actual friendship. He got along with Sam and Ricky, and none of us felt weird about how we'd all met anymore. We were in our usual booth, wings on the table, arguing about a call the ref had blown, when Ricky elbowed me and nodded toward the door. Catherine had just walked in. She spotted me almost immediately, stood there for a second like she was working up the nerve, then started walking over. She looked rough, tired around the eyes, wearing the kind of fake confidence that fools nobody. She stopped at our table, saw Enzo sitting next to me. Her face did something complicated. I need to talk to you. So talk. In private. This is fine. She stood there, caught between leaving and saying whatever she'd come to say. The table had gone quiet. Even the game seemed to fade into background noise. I made mistakes, she finally said. I know that. But 6 years has to count for something. We could try again. I've been thinking about it. And I really think we could. No. You didn't even let me finish. Didn't need to. The answer's no. Her expression shifted. That old flash of anger I remembered from every argument we'd ever had. You're really gonna sit there with him, she gestured at Enzo, and act like you're the victim here? Like you didn't blow up my entire life? Enzo just shrugged. You told me you were getting divorced. Turns out that was a lie. Seems like you blew up your own life? That was all he said. One line, delivered flat, and then he went back to his wings like she wasn't worth the effort. It hit harder than any insult could have. Catherine's voice went up. You're all sitting here judging me? You have no idea what I went through in that marriage. You have no idea. Ma'am, the manager had appeared out of nowhere. Big guy. Looked like he'd dealt with rowdier crowds than this one. You're gonna need to keep it down or step outside. I'm having a conversation with my... You're making a scene. Take it outside or I'll walk you out myself. The whole place was watching now. That specific quiet where everyone's pretending not to stare. Catherine looked around, realized she'd lost whatever audience she thought she had, and something in her just deflated. This isn't over, she said to me, but there was nothing behind it. She turned and walked out. The manager watched her go, nodded at our table like sorry about that, and went back to work. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Then Ricky let out a breath. Well, that was something. That was awkward is what it was, Sam said. You good? I was, actually. Seeing her like that, desperate and flailing and completely out of moves, I thought I'd feel something. Satisfaction, maybe? Or guilt? But I just felt tired of the whole thing. Yeah, I'm good. The game came back into focus. Someone on screen made a play worth arguing about. Enzo said something about the spread. Ricky flagged down the waitress for more wings. And just like that, we were back to normal. Wings and bad calls and the kind of easy conversation you have with people who actually have your back. Catherine was probably driving home right now, replaying the whole thing in her head, figuring out who to blame. I grabbed another wing, watched the game, and didn't think about her again for the rest of the night. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.